Hello everybody. Today in this video, I would like to introduce conditional sentences. There are 4 types of conditional sentences, and in this video, let's look at type 0 conditional sentences first. Okay, so when do we use conditional sentences? We use conditional sentences to talk about the result caused by an action. There are 2 parts in a conditional sentence, the if clause and the main clause. In the if clause, we talk about the situation or the action. In the main clause, we talk about the result. As I said before, there are 4 types of conditional sentences. So here in this lesson, we mainly talk about conditional sentences type 0. Now, let's look at these examples. As you can see, there are 2 parts in each conditional sentence, the if clause and the main clause. Let's look at example 1. If ice is heated, it melts. In this example, the if clause is the situation, if ice is heated. The main clause is the result, it melts. Let's look at example 2. If the plants don't get enough water, they die. The if clause is the situation, if plants don't get enough water. The main clause is the result, they die. The same case for the rest of the examples. If I get a fever, I rest at home. If a baby feels hungry, it cries. If you heat ice, it melts. If it rains, the ground becomes wet. You can see all the if clauses are about the situation or the condition, and the main clauses are the results. They are all about what happens in those situations or conditions. These are all examples of type 0 conditional sentences. Can you find any similarities in the usage of it? Yes. Conditional sentences are used when we want to talk about universal or scientific facts that are always true. Conditional sentences type 0 are used to describe cause and effects that are generally true. They are universal truths or obvious facts about the situation and the result. Given that situation, a certain result must take place. We use the simple present tense in both clauses, and a comma should be used when we put the if clause before the main clause. Let's look at the first example. If you pour oil on water, it floats. This is a scientific fact, and of course, the oil floats on water. We use simple present tense for the main verb in both clauses, pour and floats. We generally add s to the verb following the third person singular subject, he, she, it. And here, we add a comma after the if clause. Same case in the second example. If a person doesn't eat for 10 days, he dies. This is, of course, a generally truth. If a person doesn't eat for a few days, of course, he dies. So we use conditional sentence type 0 to talk about this condition. We use simple present tense for the main verb in both clauses. Doesn't eat and dies. Again, remember for the third person singular subject, the verbs we use have to agree with it. So here we use doesn't eat and dies to agree with the subject, he, and a person. In a conditional sentence, the subject in the if clause and the subject in the main clause can be different. Look at the first example. If you heat ice, it melts. In the if clause, the subject is you, and in the main clause, the subject is it, the ice. In the second example, if you boil water, it becomes hot. In the if clause, you is the subject, and in the main clause, the subject is it, the water. In a conditional sentence, the if clause can also come after the main clause. A comma is not needed in this case. We simply just write the result first. Look at this example here. Ice melts if you heat it. Ice melts is the main clause, which is also the result. We can write a conditional sentence in this way. Now let's try some conditional sentences type 0 exercises. The first thing we do when we handle conditional sentences is to decide which type of conditional sentence we should use. But of course, in this lesson, in this exercise, we only use type 0. Let's look at the first question. If you mix blue and yellow, it becomes green. So here we know this is a fact. If you mix blue and yellow, of course, it becomes green. So for the if clause, we use present tense. For the main clause, we also use present tense. Remember, the verb has to agree with the subject. So here the subject is it. It is third person singular. So for the verb, we have to add s to it. Question number 2. A shark dies if it loses its fin. So a shark, it is it. So we use dies. Okay, we add s to the main verb. If it loses its fin. So it is the subject. For present tense, lose, we have to add s to it if the subject is it. Question number 3. If you throw wood into water, it floats. Of course, this is generally true, and this is a fact. Number 4. If she drops a table tennis onto the ground, the ball bounces. So again, remember, for the main verb, we have to add s to it because the subject is she. It is third person singular, so it has to agree with the subject. We generally add s to the main verb. And for the last question, if you remove oxygen, fire stops burning. So this is a universal truth. So of course, we use present tense for the main clause and the if clause in conditional sentence type 0. I hope you have a better understanding of conditional sentences type 0 after watching this video. Thank you very much for your attention.